Scott and Tim, it's so good to have you on the show.
Good to be on the show, Dallin. Thanks for having us.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
of course. Well, one thing I was thinking about, first off, your business is Paddlesmash. Why did you choose something so fun to get into business with? What inspired it?
We both sort of lucked into the industry. We took very different paths. My quick and dirty version is that I was hired as an entrepreneur in residence at a venture capital firm in Chicago. And that sounds a little boring mixed with a little fun. It was some of both, but mostly fun. The whole premise there was they were hiring young, scrappy entrepreneurs, generally without an idea yet, giving them office space and kind of allowing us to mix and mingle with other entrepreneurs to see if we could come up with a concept that was worth funding. And these founders of this incubator had capital, and they would challenge us to come up with an idea that was testable and then test it as cheaply and quickly as possible. We even would write our ideas on little cutouts of goldfish, with the idea being that no idea is precious and we should treat our ideas like goldfish, a pet that, you know, if it were to die, you wouldn't feel heartbroken and you could easily flush it down the toilet. And so that's what I did. We, with some other co-founders, came up with a concept around brain health. We decided to aggregate a bunch of brain healthy products together in one shop. We opened a kiosk at a mall in Chicago. That evolved into a brick and mortar location. And over 10 years, that evolved to have 40 locations across the US. And we were focused on primarily toys and games that were good for your brain. And so we were kind of going out into the world looking for anything that was new, innovative, fun. But we were always trying to be at the forefront of this, looking for trend and looking for kind of new, brand new ideas that we could incubate in our shops. And that's where I met Tim.
Yeah, what a story. Well, Tim, I guess your side of the story, go ahead and share some insights.
Sure. So around 30 years old, I decided I'd always wanted to be an entrepreneur, and I had finally made up the courage to make the leap. I was at the time working in commercial real estate at like a, I don't know, call it a corporate desk job type of a scenario, and just wasn't really happy, and it always had that entrepreneurial itch. And I had started investing with some guys I went to college with who were doing a software company. And again, I something about turning 30. I didn't have a family yet, and I was like, God, like, when am I going to do it? And I didn't have my own idea yet, but I talked to those guys and I said, hey, like, what if I came on board and joined with you guys? And, we tried to build this business together. So I did that. And so, it was sales software we were building, and it was venture backed, managing a big team, burning a ton of cash, very stressful. And on the side, I had the idea to do a board game. The opposite of software, just a physical board game. I read an article in Inc. magazine that covered Cards Against Humanity, which was a really popular game, a couple of years ago. And they kind of laid out the blueprint for what they did to bring their card game to life. And they were just a bunch of like buddies from high school that did this in their early 20s. And so I figured, hey, I've got a game that I've been playing with friends up at their lake houses and, late nights while you're trying to just, I don't know, crush the last few beers to do something fun. And so I ended up, launching this board game. And unlike any other business I'm involved with, it just kind of like caught on quickly. My first retailer was Scott. I'd done a little Kickstarter, barely got funded. It wasn't one of these ones that blows up on Kickstarter, barely hit my funding goal. And then the day I was funded, I was introduced to Scott through a mutual connection. And he was, into the concept, into the idea, and decided to take it into his stores. And so that began my journey in the towing game space, and generally kind of fallen in love with it. And, it's now what I do full time is, bring fun products to life.
Yeah. Wow. There's something so inspiring about the story, because I find that it's important to shed light on brick and mortar and physical products. At least my world's been so involved with digital products and services that there's something that's so inspiring when you can take a product that is just simply fun. It's not, there's not a massive agenda behind it. You're not trying to make tons of money from just one sell of that product. And it's simply just something that brings joy to someone. And I love that idea. And the fact that you've been able to scale it and expand it is pretty insane. What was that look like? What did that look like as far as taking it to that first brick and mortar store for you, Scott, to then 40 stores, and just what made sense to expand at that point?
The whole time it was a test and learn. And I think it was trying to kind of have efficient use of capital. So, you know, we were venture backed from the beginning. And I'd say while we were venture backed, it was very small pockets of cash. And so we had to justify the next tranche of cash. And so it was always, all right, let's try it as a kiosk. If that works well enough, then we'll move to the next stage, which is a brick and mortar location. If that works well enough, well, then let's try 3 different types of brick and mortar locations and see which is the right model for us. We found from that the ideal brick and mortar location was in mall. And so then we decided, all right, that's then the opportunity to expand even further. But every step along the way, it was test, learn, and justify the additional use of capital.
Yeah, that's great. Well, so then your powers combined into Paddlesmash. Tell us a little bit more about what inspired this game / toy / product. Tell us a little bit more about it.
Yeah, so it's an outdoor backyard game, and the backstory is pretty interesting. It begins with a gentleman by the name of Joe Bingham, and Joe is a structural engineer that lives in the foothills of Utah, and he has 7 kids, 6 of them boys. And Joe and his family, love backyard games, and for a long time they love playing Spikeball. Spikeball is, super popular, backyard game for the past 10 years or so. But Joe's gotten a little older, and his boys have grown up, and they just kind of whoop him, and he can't really compete. And they've all kind of gravitated towards pickleball now. Pickleball's incredibly popular sport, fastest growing sport in America, and the whole family enjoys that, and they can all play well together. But the issue is that a lot of people that are playing pickleball these days is that the courts are always crowded. Typically, it's still kind of hard to find. So you're having to travel 20 plus minutes. And, he didn't have the option of putting one in his backyard at, $40,000 or whatever it costs. And so him as a structural engineer by trade was like, God, what could I do here to kind of bring this game, pickleball to life in our backyard at a reasonable cost? And that's how he, just again, was a handy person, knew how to use a router and a CNC machine and, different materials, and basically built a prototype that is now Paddlesmash, and perfected it over a number of years and played it with family and friends around the neighborhood. And everyone had a ton of fun with it and really wanted to commercialize it and bring it to market. However, just didn't have the know-how to really do that. And through a mutual connection, was introduced to Scott. And so that's kind of the backstory of, how we were, introduced to this product and how we got involved.
Yeah, definitely. So then that's where both of you came together on Paddlesmash, specifically, apart from Tim, your products getting, or your board game getting into Scott's stores. This is kind of really the first product that you came together on.
We skipped some steps, but ultimately my store sold off to a big Canadian company. I worked there for 3 years. Tim's game got into Target, got into Walmart, got into all of the
what is the name of the game?
Yeah, Utter Nonsense.
Me asking.
No,
Utter Nonsense. That's a great. I haven't heard of it, but I definitely want to. We have Target nearby. I'll look it up.
It did very well, and I still happen across it in people's game collections. It's a funny thing I do when I'm in someone's home. There's these things people look for in homes. I always look for their games collections. I judge them off of what games they have.
I've got some friends that literally have bookshelves and walls full of games.
Yeah.
And you're getting into some of the most obscure games you never heard of, and half of them come from other countries. that are adapted into American games. So yeah, no, I know what that's like. It's definitely a personality identifier, I feel like.
Yeah, and we're in a renaissance of physical games. It's a funny thing when I tell people what I do. I say I'm in toys and games, and the first question almost everyone asks is, "Oh, like apps, like video games?" So it's a funny thing that video games has hijacked the idea of games in the American psyche, but physical games are thriving right now. And I think it's just this desire on people's part to reconnect, to put their phones down and find an excuse to play over a table or in the backyard with yard games. Yard games is the fastest growing category in the toy industry. So we saw that and got excited by that. And we both personally love that a lot. So yeah, I guess to your original question, which I maybe have forgotten, but yeah, I think we just saw this as an opportunity with Paddlesmash to kind of combine the best of two worlds and bring this to life out in the world. The way it plays is basically you've got this central base, and it plays with 3 players. It plays one-on-one, but it plays best 2v2. And in 2 versus 2, you're standing opposite a teammate, serving to them, and then you've got up to 3 hits to get it back into the court. It's like bump set spike in volleyball, or bump set hit in spikeball. Same idea, 3 hits to get it back into the court. And then the other team has same 3 hits to get it back into the court as well. And it kind of goes back and forth. The biggest key difference here is you're playing with a paddle and with a pickleball. And we've got a hard base, which absorbs some of the blows. One thing we tested was whether this could be played on a spikeball net. And it can. But when you hit that ball with a pickleball paddle down into that net, it shoots it about a mile into the air. So the rallies are super short. We also tested it without a net. And what people were doing were hitting these side shots, and it was just impossible to have long rallies. And so we decided, what Joe did originally, but we love his decisions here, to have a net system, which then requires you to hit downward, and then a plastic base which absorbs some of that shot. The whole goal here is to keep play more contained and make rallies long. And we just find that really fun. So the kind of quick and dirty history here is that Tim sold his game business. I sold my business. We both vowed to work together at some point. We had just hit it off when we were working together with his game. And so our paths kind of eventually met. I left the big company. Tim sold his business off, and we're like, all right, what's next? I met Joe. I shared the idea with Tim. We said, all right, this is it. This is the one to work together. And so we got back together. Tim flew out to Utah, and we tested this out. We actually took it to some local pickleball courts, and just to see how they would react. And like immediately after we set it up, people were stopping mid-game and coming up to the fence to watch. And then they came over to play like an hour-long play testing session with these players. And we didn't present it as our idea, because it wasn't at this point. This was Joe's idea. So we were more like, hey, listen, we don't know this guy really, but we want to see if this idea is any good. It's a good tip for inventors to get valid and honest feedback, is to not present their idea as their own. So lie a little to get quality feedback. So even if you're playing with friends and family, say, hey, listen, someone's given me this idea to test out. Let's test it together. That's what we did with our concept. We got really positive feedback, and we decided, all right, this is an idea worth pursuing. So over the last year, we've been working on this.
Amazing. And is it, so you got the website and the socials going. What has it been looking like over the last year as far as the growth so far?
Well, so, what we did was we did a licensing agreement with Joe. And so, Scott and I are the publishers of this game, and, own the business of Paddlesmash. And, based on sales, Joe will just receive a royalty for inventing it. But what Joe had was a very rough prototype. It was great, but it wasn't something that we could immediately take to market. And so what Scott and I had to do was, get involved, hire an industrial engineer and design firm to create a version of what Joe made that would be scalable, mass producible, something that was portable, a little lighter weight than what, Joe had put together, hobbled together in his garage. And so that process took several months, quite frankly, 3D CAD drawings, creating multiple prototypes that version that, we've designed, 3D printing, which is really cool now. You can do that to get some like quick feedback on what you're building. So, we finally finished that a couple months ago and have a great manufacturer partner that we work with, and have our first set of units that are coming over currently. And so we're not yet live in the market. We will be actually just before this podcast. Got a note that they should arrive to our warehouse in about a week or two. So I think perhaps by the time that this goes live,
Yeah.
we will be live. And so it's basically gonna be available. We're starting out direct to consumer at our website, which is paddlesmash.com. Will also be available on Amazon, of course. And I think can I say this publicly now, Scott? We did just get our first official retail order from Shields, which was a huge win.
Yeah.
To not even be live yet with the product, and to already be getting into Shields stores is pretty awesome. So we'll be in Shields as of next spring.
Amazing. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah,
that's great. Wow. I'm excited to try it out. I've got 2 boys at home under 5. And so, I mean, maybe the 1-year-olds can't handle it too much, but
maybe a little young for that crew.
Yeah. Even the 5-year-old, we have pickleball nearby. And so I think a combination of the two, and we're always trying to, we have an unfinished basement. And so, when we're at home, he's always like, let's do pickleball in the basement over the chairs. But, having something that's a little bit more contained, sounds really amazing. Yeah, this is great. I see that one of your mantras is to basically that some of the best ideas happen while you're not in the office. Tell us a little bit more about why that is important to you both.
Yeah, well, one of the things that was fun about this was that we met Joe, and Joe presented an idea, but this is an idea that Tim and I had been thinking about for months in advance. So we spend a lot of time scouring the internet, just looking for kind of what's in the ether. And, it's hard to be online these days and not come across an article about pickleball. It is booming right now. So that's A. And then B, you can't drive past a public park, at least where I live, without seeing a group of kids out playing spikeball. So it was to us very apparent that there was something happening out in the outdoor space. And so it's like many great ideas, it ends up being a mashup of already existing ideas. We had started thinking about this, and we even have an early concept drawing that shows a mashup of those two concepts. And then we met Joe, and Joe showed us our idea more fully baked, and we're like, perfect. He helped us fast forward this concept a year probably by having already figured out a bunch of those elements. But for us, just like being in the office, we probably wouldn't have noticed that. You have to kind of get out into the wild to find stuff like that. You have to get out into the wild to see what's out there, to kind of notice things like we did in the park. Also, you have to get out of the wild to get feedback on your idea. This is where, if we would have come up with this in an office and then relied on the feedback of office mates for the concept, we would have missed out on a lot of really valid feedback on the concept that's helped shape it to what it is. And so this is where it's like, Tim and I we work remotely, we work apart from one another, but we kind of get ourselves out into the world enough to be able to get that valuable feedback.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that insight. That's great. Tim, do you have anything to add, or I guess your own thoughts around that?
No, I think he pretty much covered it. So yeah. I'm not going to sugarcoat it.
Well, it's self-explanatory, I think, with that phrase, but I do love that concept, and that it's built around this idea of, to me, adventure, of fun, of really truly getting out of your home and office and doing something more physical. And so I think that's pretty incredible. Well, you've already kind of referenced it, but tell us a little bit more about where the listeners and the watchers can find you, find Paddlesmash, and to join this new business.
Sure. Yeah, so
go ahead, Tim.
Yeah. What did you say, Scott?
You got it.
Yeah. So we're live at paddlesmash.com. It's available for pre-order right now. I think by the time this airs, we'll be able to ship it next day or whatever from our warehouse in Wisconsin. and it'll be available on Amazon as well, starting in Shields, call it, next year. We're also working on some big partnerships with just some players that have emerged in the pickleball space. Can't talk too much about that, but some big opportunities with some different partners in the pickleball space that we're excited about. And Scott and I are flying out to just say one of the largest outdoor retailer in the country next week. So hopefully be available in some other stores as well. But the initial response has been awesome, and we're super excited to get people playing it here soon.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Well, hey, Scott, Tim, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for sharing more about Paddlesmash and your entrepreneur journey. It's great.
Thank you for having us on. We appreciate it.
Yeah, of course.